Hey, welcome to Film Fanatics, three film geeks discussing movies new and old. My name is Dan.
My name is Justin.
And I'm Joe.
The Oscar nominations are now out, and while we won't go over each and every one, in our top 5 this week, we give our picks for the people and movies that the Academy snubbed this year. So we'll do that a little bit later on in the show. We also, of course, have our new releases, which include the 5th Jack Ryan film called Jack Ryan Shadow Recruit, and the first one starring Chris Pine in the role. An interesting home media moment with The Lone Ranger, and our triple feature of older films. This week we've got The Impossible, Joe's pick for Guilty Pleasure Month, XXX, and our Oscar nominee A to Z this week, the 1960 film The Alamo. Let's dive right into it this week with Jack Ryan Shadow Recruit, and Justin's going to tell us about that.
Thank you, Dan. Jack Ryan, played by Chris Pine, is a young CIA analyst covering as a compliance officer who discovers that some accounts have been firewalled from him. He discovers that the funds are controlled by Victor Cheverin, played by Kenneth Branagh, also the director of the film, and the results could potentially create a new Great Depression in America. This is the second Jack Ryan film I've seen, first being The Hunt for Red October, and it seems that director Branagh clearly is trying to appeal the character to a younger audience in the same vein as the Star Trek reboot series, albeit not nearly as efficiently. The film tries to keep suspense while throwing in action sequences and a couple awkward attempts at humor. The New Vision's ambitious, albeit disjointed attempt is just trying too hard to appeal to newcomers, and because of that, it feels more often than most a little predictable as to what may be coming next. Pine does a decent job as the title character, as does the rest of the cast, but ultimately none of them really do anything that would make one believe that this could be the start of a new potential franchise. Jack Ryan Shadow Recruit is slightly better than the majority of mediocre films that come out within the months of January and February, but only by so much, and for that, I give it a B-.
Joe, what'd you think of Jack Ryan?
Well, I've actually seen all the Jack Ryan films. I'm a pretty big fan of the character, and I liked most of the movies. In fact, I think that they were all decent at the very least, and this one kind of fits in that vein. I think the performances were mostly good, particularly from Chris Pine. I think he did a good job with the title character. I also thought that Branagh's directing really was showcased here. It had some really fluid pacing, so I wasn't really bored at all through the film. I was pretty entertained by it. Chris Pine does do well with the character and makes him very likable. Admittedly, as Justin kind of pointed out, the film is kind of cliche, and it does feel like it loses some of its ground towards the end, and I think that's probably because it's a prequel, and a lot of things that Jack Ryan faces later are much bigger in scale, so I can kind of understand why it might not be as exciting. As far as the other performances go, like from Knightley and Costner, I thought that they were all right. The weakest element was actually probably Branagh for me, because maybe it's him trying to balance directing with acting. I thought that he played an okay villain, but he didn't really seem that believable to me. And I know that he can really act. He was Henry V, so I felt like we really could have pulled a better performance from him, to be honest. But he did okay. Overall, though, I have to say I wasn't entertained. I found it enjoyable. I liked it, and I felt that there definitely was something possible for a franchise. I think there's definitely something there worthwhile, and I give it a B.
Oh, very nice. Yeah, I guess it'll depend on how well it does internationally, whether or not they're going to go forth with more installments, because the first weekend of Shadow Recruit here in the States was not really that stellar, so they're only expecting it to clear about 60 to 70 million overall, which obviously would be a disappointment, but, a lot of times these action movies do very well internationally.
It hasn't stopped some people with less victories before,
No,
If anything,
for sure.
it often makes all the difference.
So,
Dan, before you go into your review, I wanted to ask Justin a question. You said you thought that the director, Kenneth Branagh, was trying to appeal towards younger audiences. I didn't really pick up on that. Maybe you could clarify that for me?
Well, it like I said, in sort of the Star Trek way, obviously I've only seen The Hunt for Red October, so this is going to go much on the observations I've made from that film.
Mm-hmm.
Jack Ryan seems to not necessarily be this quintessential action hero, but more or less of a character trying to deal with a suspenseful situation. In the case of Jack Ryan Shadow Recruit, it's kind of shoot first, ask questions later.
I think I can actually help clarify that a little bit for you. This is probably because it's supposed to be his first mission, so he's supposed to be kind of young and experienced and green. It's kind of similar to Ben Affleck in Some of All Fears. It was a very similar character, whereas when you get to the Harrison Ford days, he's very experienced. He's kind of the tough, badass character that Jack Ryan is known as. So that might be one reason why that's the case. And you're right, it is kind of a lighter movie, but I feel like that's more the time and place and context rather than the film itself.
That could be the case, and this is the first Jack Ryan story that's not actually from a book.
Though, to be honest, based around the plot, it actually seemed like it could have been.
I just felt like this was trying to make it more approachable for a younger audience, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just re-envisioning the character, which can
be tough.
Yeah, it can be kind of a double-edged sword in a way.
That's true.
Well, this was my first experience with the character.
Oh.
I've not seen... I mean, I've seen pieces of Hunt for Red October, but that's the only one. I would say if this was any indication for the full scope, I'm not going to run out and rent Patriot games anytime soon. But I do understand what you're saying, that, with it being his first mission and sort of the first time we're supposed to be introduced to the character...
Well,
I can see how maybe other movies might have been a little more exciting.
To be fair, I actually saw the movie tonight, as you guys know, and the person I saw it with is a big fan of the movies, and she said at the end of the movie, well, it's no Harrison Ford, but, so just be that an indication.
Well, it's not that Shadow Recruit is that bad specifically, it's just completely generic. It's easily Kenneth Branagh's worst directing effort. There's a lot of cheesy moves, especially for his own character. There was one scene in particular where Victor sort of, says his, bad guy little jokey phrase that you might get in these action movies, and it, zoomed in on him. I just thought it was really cheesy. I thought Chris Pine did really well, though, in the lead role. I think he definitely proved with this that he can be an action star outside of the Star Trek franchise, which I was a little bit worried about at the beginning of the movie. But just everything is so by the numbers. As an example, of course, there's an abandoned high-rise directly across the street from the building they're trying to break into, so Kevin Costner can look into it and direct Jack on what to do. And, of course, his girlfriend, Keira Knightley, thinks he's cheating on her, so she turns up in Russia, and then she finds out he's in the CIA, and then she gets involved in the mission. It's everything we've seen so many times before. So there's nothing inherently awful about the movie. It's just not all that exciting because there's just nothing new. I give Shadow Recruit a C+.
I guess to kind of counter that a little bit, these Jack Ryan novels are kind of, you might say they're by the numbers, but it's kind of like saying something that's cliche is something that established it. And I think that if you were more familiar with the character, both you, I feel like you would have enjoyed the movie more because it does kind of follow certain things from the books and movies, and there's a lot of good callbacks. So I feel like if you watch some of the other films and then watch this one, I'm not saying you might think it's...
Get a different perspective.
You might not think it's a great film, might not improve your grade much, but you still might enjoy it a little bit more, I think. So I think it's still worth checking out the other Jack Ryan movies. To be perfectly honest, and this is including Sum of All Fears, I do think this is the weakest Jack Ryan movie I've seen, but it still was pretty good.
Yeah, you still gave it a B.
I still enjoyed it. I really liked it. The worst thing about it for me was actually Branagh's character. I thought he was just so cheesy.
Yeah.
I mean, I liked it, but I felt like he wasn't putting that much energy into it. Maybe he wasn't really feeling it.
Well, that was another big thing. It's like he's trying to create this complicated story, but he's also trying to make it appeal to, like I mentioned, a younger audience.
I didn't necessarily get the younger audience vibe either. I mean, the two people I saw it with are 18 and 19, and they felt the same way about it I did.
What do you think about it that was more accessible to younger audiences? Can you
like I mentioned, younger actor. I mean, obviously we saw it a little bit with Ben Affleck and Sum of All Fears. Yeah. I didn't see it personally, but going off of what I read, that's what they were at least trying to do. As I mentioned, instead of being this very story-driven, letting the action sequences come however flows with the actual storyline, it's kind of shoot first, ask questions later. And there are still these hints that there might be a deeper story with this in terms of Chevron's actual motive, but overall it just still sort of feels like that, let's try and have this fluffy kind of bring everybody in to watch this cool action movie and not necessarily be a more complicated story under it.
Well, to be honest, for the most part, I'd say that is Jack Ryan. It's more about character studies in these situations. I think that they're bigger budget and maybe better executed than previous films, but I think that generally that's what the Tom Clancy, Jack Ryan stories are basically. They're just big, fun spy thrillers that aren't necessarily too intricate.
It's interesting also on your point about Branaght's character not having much energy. I would actually argue the exact opposite. I think he was trying to do something ambitious by playing a character with an accent, and it just felt like, as Dan put it, more often the most stereotypical Russian villain.
Yeah, I mean, I thought he was all right as the villain. I thought he was much better in the movie than he was behind the camera for it. We all know that he's capable of a lot more, even with an action film,
well,
like you mentioned, Thor.
I still think that, for me, it was enjoyable. I wasn't bored throughout the movie, so something about his directing worked for me.
Okay.
You know, I'd agree that he's definitely done better things, but...
Oh, unquestionably.
I mean, obviously, the guy does Shakespearean films. I mean,
Right.
Which is why I don't really consider it fair to call this his worst effort.
he's trying something very out of his league, and something he's not used to doing. I don't really think it was bad.
When he only has like a handful of other forays into other films.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's shift gears to, you mentioned the word bad. Let's talk about The Legend of Hercules.
Probably my best picture nomination for 2014.
This is...
All right. The Legend of Hercules, a 2014 action fantasy film that follows, very loosely, The Legend of Hercules. The film stars Kellan Lutz as Hercules and follows his journey to return to his love after being sent to near death by a treacherous stepfather and brother. I'm not really going to bother with any more of the synopsis because no one should see this movie.
That's fair.
The plot is bare bones and boring, the pacing is horrific, the acting is flat, and the action isn't really that interesting most of the time. The most frustrating element is how little this story actually follows the original tale of Hercules. It tries to tell a far more complicated story than most of the stories entailed, and it's clear that the three writers didn't know that much about the character, just bringing us a poor excuse for a 300 ripoff. The only real positives I can say are that some of the performances were passable, and there were one or two good effects. One of which not being the lion Hercules slays, though one of his 12 labors they felt that they had to reference. This waste of 90 minutes is nothing compared to the Kevin Sorbo series or the Disney film, both of which had a far more creativity, charm, and an understanding of the character. The Legend of Hercules gets an F.
Legend of Hercules is, I mean, first of all, you hit it on the head. Nobody should see this movie.
At all.
But it's clumsily directed, horribly acted. I thought it had this, like, washed out, blurry kind of look to it. I thought for a little bit that we were in the 3D showing, and they just forgot to switch off the 3D lens because it looked blurry.
The color looked off.
Yeah, the color looked off. The CGI is awful, and it's so funny you mentioned the lion because that's exactly the scene I was going to reference with the CGI. It looked terrible. I've seen better production value in 20-year-old TV shows with, I'm sure, a fraction of the budget.
The Kevin Sorbo series.
Yeah, like I never saw the Hercules TV show, but my guess is that even that looked better than this.
You're correct. The effects are much better.
And that was a syndicated show. It was a bare bones budget
from like '93.
From the early '90s. And if I saw one more slow motion sequence, I was going to lose my mind. I turned to Justin in the movie, and I just said, "Yeah, we get it. Slow motion." It was like every fight scene had 5, 6, 7 different slow motion parts. Mm-hmm. And also, every 2 or 3 scenes, I guess it was when they were at the castle or whatever, but they had this like floating debris or flower petals or pollen. I don't know what it was, but it was like just floating in the air. It looked awful. The dialogue was laughable. Kellan Lutz is a terrible actor.
I'll be honest. There was something I wanted to say that was kind of positive, but I didn't know his name. I couldn't find him. Maybe you guys know. The gentleman that played his sidekick, I don't know his name. He was okay. Like I actually thought he was a lot better than the lead. So.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, pretty much everybody in the movie was.
And wasn't Kellan Lutz in Twilight or something?
He was. Yeah, he had like minor parts in the Twilight movies.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm with you on this. The Legend of Hercules gets an F from me. First F of the year.
Justin will surprise us, I'm sure.
Stories within mythology are often so compelling that I really cannot understand why they lend themselves to such awful films. Director Rennie Harlin, who made one of the biggest box office flops, Cutthroat Island, does absolutely nothing to change that in The Legend of Hercules. Instead of taking one of the more exciting storylines from Hercules mythos, Harlan seems to think that audiences will be much more happier with a pitiful narrative starring an incredibly uncharismatic performance from Twilight actor Kellan Lutz. The storyline feels episodic and clumsy, often ignoring some of its own plot points to continue treading along, and the visuals often come off as cheesy, possibly ripping off films that did it better. It may not be the worst film 2014 has to offer, but The Legend of Hercules is an awful film that I truly hope causes Harlan to never work in the filmmaking business again, and I start this off as my first F of the new year.
It might be the worst of the year. It's going to be hard to beat it.
I don't think much could top it.
It's pretty terrible.
I honestly could barely stand it. I almost walked out 3 times.
Is that right?
And I thought, hey, I could probably review this movie after seeing 20 minutes and I'd be fine. And I was right.
You could have. I knew I was going to give it an F about 10 minutes in. And sometimes I think that and it surprises me, and by the end I'm like, oh, all right, that was like a D+. Nope, not this.
No.
No excuse.
I was kind of interested at first, but I think that, honestly, probably within the first couple scenes, I was like... Actually, I think what really did it for me, what solidified how bad it was when I saw Lutz acting as Hercules. I'm like, this is Hercules? Really?
Yeah.
This is bad.
It's just flat.
It was... I don't know.
Well, he doesn't have the stature that a Hercules needs to have.
This is a minor gripe, but it is still an issue because it's Hercules. I hate it when they make Hercules weak. If there's one thing that Hercules is not, he's not physically weak. This guy was getting thrown around. He didn't have this amazing godlike strength. Not to spoil anything, but he doesn't become a badass until Zeus gives him a lightning whip at the end.
Right.
That was kind of one of those things that was one of the cherries on top for how bad it was.
Yeah, it's a fair complaint. It talks to your point that the writers just...
No,
we're not.
In all
following
honesty,
the story.
I've read some of the tales of Hercules. This is not one of them. It's like very loosely based around something that happened when he was born, but it was mostly an original story, and I think that was the problem. It's very easy. You could just adapt what's there and just kind of flesh it out a bit. Do the 12 labors. Easy. Easy.
Sorry.
No, but you're right. Easy. And his father was a king, apparently, not a farmer. I don't know.
Either way, you've got Kellan Lutz in the lead role. So even if they had done all of those things, it still would be, at best, a slightly below average movie. All right, well, moving on, we have one of our Oscar nominee films from 2013 that we had not gotten to see last year, and that is August, Osage County. In this film, Violet Weston, played by Meryl Streep, has been diagnosed with mouth cancer, though still continues to smoke, and it hasn't made her lose a step in the feistiness department either. Meanwhile, her husband Beverly, played by Sam Shepard, an alcoholic and formerly famous poet, hires a caretaker for Violet and soon after disappears and is discovered to have killed himself. The whole family comes home, including the couple's 3 daughters, Barbara, the strong-willed, outspoken one, played by Julia Roberts, with her ex-husband in tow, played by Ewan McGregor, and their 14-year-old daughter, played by Abigail Breslin. You've got Karen, the free-spirit daughter, Juliette Lewis, with her fiancé, played by Dermot Mulroney, and Ivy, the baby, desperate to be loved, played by Julianne Nicholson. Also showing up is Violet's sister and her husband, played by Margo Martindale and Chris Cooper, and rounding out the cast is Benedict Cumberbatch as their son. As you can probably tell, this is a huge ensemble cast, and yet each character is so completely defined and fleshed out. The film was written by Tracy Letts, just like the stage play it's based on, and it really helps because he has such a clear vision of how to perfectly transfer the play to the screen, along with help from director John Wells. So often in these plays turning to movies, they're largely just 1 or 2 locales, like Rabbit Hole or one that we watched for the show recently, Carnage. And though much of August does take place in the West at home, there are also a fair amount of car scenes or outdoor scenes, and Letts and Wells bring it all together very well. This is a dysfunctional family of the highest degree, but you really do believe that they are a family. The way the sisters interact, the women interact with their husbands, and the way Violet acts with everyone rings so true. It's a shame that the Academy awarded Streep her 3rd Oscar for the wrong movie. When she won a couple years ago for The Iron Lady, it should have gone to Viola Davis for The Help. I doubt Oscar will award her a 4th time, but it's one of the best performances of her amazing career. And of the 5 nominees in the category this year, I think she had the best performance of the bunch. I give August Osage County an A. Joe, what'd you think?
I really think that was a great synopsis, Dan.
Well, thank you.
Really, there's really not much more I can add to that. I pretty much agree with everything you said. I thought the performances were great, and you'd think that sometimes there's a concern that an ensemble cast might actually bog the movie down, because you have all these great actors without any one of them hogging too much of the limelight.
And we see it time and time again.
Happens a lot, but this is one of those instances where they have an excellent script to go off. They're going off of a play, and I think that every single actor does bring something good, and that speaks to the writing, and there's a great chemistry there. It really complements it, and they just sing so well. You really do believe they're a family. It's so grounded, but it tells a really, really good story, and it actually has some good twists and turns that I honestly did not expect.
A lot, yeah.
It was really much more than I was expecting from this film, and I really enjoyed it. It kept me engaged throughout the whole thing. I thought the dialogue was witty. I thought the themes they touched on were quite relevant. I think it's a brilliant film, and I think it needs to deserve a lot more attention than it's getting.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Come up in a list later.
Yeah.
But I agree with you, Meryl Streep. Probably one of my favorite performances by her. I mean, really, she's kind of one of those people that always tops it.
Right.
I really feel like I've seen her do well, but no, it was good. I thought Chris Cooper was great. Ewan McGregor was great. Julia Roberts, haven't seen her in a while, but she was good.
Yeah, she was really great, too.
She was good. I mean, really, there was not a bad performance in the movie. The only minor gripe I have is that I felt that all the characters were kind of fleshed out, but I felt like we could have had more time with them. I think that there were so many characters that we honestly could have had them fleshed out even more.
Mm-hmm.
And I also did think it was interesting, like Sam Shepard's character, I understand how important his introduction was to the movie, but I feel like there could have been a different way to handle it, because I felt like he was a character we could have gotten to know more of, and it would have been interesting to see him interact with all these characters a little bit before his death. I just feel like that beginning of the scene was interesting because it really set the tone of the film.
Yeah.
But there was kind of this awkwardness to it that I felt like there was something missing with that.
Okay.
Because I don't know, his death was a bit off for me. But those are relatively minor things, and it didn't really go against the film. But maybe it's just the fact I was intrigued by his character, kind of like every other character in the movie. I kind of wanted a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
And there's only so much time that the film gives us. But I thought it was excellent, and I too give it an A.
I can totally understand what you're saying about the Sam Shepard thing.
It's one of those things.
But what I liked about how they did that was you do get to know him piece by piece through the eyes of the other family members. So you get to see their interpretation of who he was. And everybody sort of has a slightly different perspective on him.
That's true.
You know, and I sort of like that. I will admit, the only thing that kept me from giving this one an A+ is that I did sort of want more, and I thought it ended a little bit abruptly.
It did end a little abruptly.
You know, and I could have used easily... I mean, I really liked these characters. I could have easily used some more time with them. Justin, what did you think of August Osage County?
August Osage County stays true to its theatrical roots, and it shows in the film adaptation of the stage play by making the most of just a mere house and a couple cars. It takes a little bit of time to get to know these characters, which may come off as a bit slow during the first act, but once the words start slinging at the dinner table, it creates a perfect blend of dysfunctional family drama and outrageous humor. The narrative takes a number of clever twists and turns, as Joe mentioned, throughout the film, leaving the audience always shocked to find what family secret will be revealed next, and to what extent do the characters know about them. It's definitely not the most upbeat film of 2013, but watching these interesting characters play off each other in various conflicts is funny, intense, and in a few instances, even a little touching. Much like her, I give August Osage County an A for now, but upon further reflection, this could easily become an A+ before we do our top 20 lists again.
I want to echo that. I'm very close to borderline.
I am as well.
On an A+. I think I have to watch it again as well.
Yeah, and Justin just mentioned something. Once Oscar season hits, we are going to be revisiting our Best of the Year show and sort of going back over our top 20, because there were several movies that we did not get to see due to their limited availability in 2013. So that's what you mean when you say that. It might find a place in your top 20.
That's a relatively safe bet, yes.
And your heart?
Maybe my heart, yes.
I have a question for you, though.
By all means.
I didn't find it slow at all, because you had mentioned that after we saw it, and I thought, okay, his interpretation, I didn't see it, But to be honest, I mean, I think we got to know these characters quite well, more or less upon their entrance to the film.
What part was slow for you, Justin? Because I didn't get that either.
Like I said, the majority of like the first act, the first 20, maybe 30 minutes, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less, just sort of seeing these characters come up individually. It's not necessarily bad. It's just sort of taking a little while to get the ball rolling. And I mean, it does pay off. I was very happy with what came after that.
I guess literally, speaking to the film's origins, you have to set the stage, set the characters before you can actually go into the plot.
Exactly. I mean, I didn't think it was bad. I actually disagree with you on the fact that I found that the ending was abrupt. I actually really liked the ending. I know there was a little bit of controversy when it originally ran at film festivals because of its bleakness. I
can believe that.
I remember them saying that they were possibly going to do some extra shooting with for the ending. I don't know if they actually did or didn't.
I know you brought that up, Justin. I do agree that the film overall does have kind of an underlying bleakness to it, but I honestly think that the ending did have a ray of hope, though. I think I mentioned that to you.
I think so, too, and if that was the reshot ending they were talking about, I think it did a very good job of justifying the decisions made for that ending.
Mm-hmm.
I think it has a ray of hope for some.
Not for others, necessarily.
And not for others.
But
and I think that's what makes it real.
Yeah.
I was going to say...
Not everybody gets away with a happy ending.
It's true.
And some instances for the movie, it also is left ambiguous, which I kind of like. I feel like we as audience members deserve the right to at least be able to interpret that as our own ending.
I did not find it slow at all. I was riveted right from the start.
It was very good.
Well, each their own. We all liked it, though.
Yeah.
No.
A's across the board. That is rare on this show.
That's actually very rare.
Yeah. I would say probably Dallas Buyers Club was the last time we all had an A or higher as our grade. So speaks to it. All right, Justin, you and I saw this movie that just won at the Golden Globes for Best Foreign Film, and that is The Great Beauty. Why don't you tell us about that?
Jep Gambardella, played by Tony Servillo, is a retired man who wrote his best work in his 20s and has since made a living as a columnist and throwing lavish parties. However, on his 65th birthday, Jep takes a journey to reflect on his own life and evaluating whether or not there may be something beautiful behind it and the city of Rome itself. If nothing else can be said about The Great Beauty, the film has gorgeous settings and cinematography alongside a fantastic score and soundtrack. That said, The Great Beauty is also a film utilizing artistic style to communicate the overall narrative, and the results will decidedly divide audiences. There are moments in which this gets communicated better than others, particularly around the second act, when the film captures the most intrigue and interest, but the ending throws so much at the screen that it often gets confusing trying to figure out what exactly it's trying to do or say. That said, to quote a character early on in the film, art shouldn't need an explanation. Whether or not that's a legitimate excuse for art also serving as film can be debated. The Great Beauty is a film with quite a bit to say, which entices as much as it confuses, and for that, I give it a C+.
Yeah, Justin, obviously there's something that you and I are missing with this, because this movie's accolades precede it. It plays number 1 on Time Out London's Best Films of 2013, number 2 on Time Magazine. It's up for Best Foreign Language Film at the Oscars. I thought it was really boring, and though it looked beautiful, it just didn't have much to say. I completely agree with you. Joe asked us afterwards what it was about, and you and I struggled to really define an answer.
I believe you guys said it was geriatric Great Gatsby.
yeah. I joked that with all the colorful party scenes that it was kind of like the geriatric Gatsby to me.
I mean, I'm interested in it, but you guys didn't exactly give glowing reviews for something that's up for Best Foreign Film.
Yeah, I have to say I am surprised that it won Best Foreign Film with the Globes.
Is it because of the artistic nature of it? Maybe it does something very different?
That would be my argument. This is a film that you kind of watch, you think about, you talk to people, then you rewatch, you think more about it, you talk more about it, and then you sort of get what they may have been trying to say about it, or maybe not. I don't know.
That could be a good reason.
Which is intellectual, and that's a lot of what Italian filmmaking, from my perspective, is a lot about, but it's definitely a debatable choice.
Visually, it is stunning. I mean, it's a beautiful film to watch. Now, can you stand 2 hours and 15 minutes of just looking at beauty? Maybe you can, maybe you can't. I did enjoy Jep's interactions with his boss at the newspaper that he worked for. I thought those were some of the best scenes in the movie. Certainly, you had probably the most character development in those scenes, or at least character revealing elements. And, there were a couple other things, but this movie's greatness definitely eluded me a bit. I give The Great Beauty a C-. Justin, what do you think its chances are for foreign language film at the Oscars? I don't think I've seen any of the other nominees, because Blue is the Warmest Color did not get nominated.
It didn't, which kind of surprised me. I'm in the process of watching one of them right now, The Hunt, which is a Danish film. I actually find that really, really good. I'm hoping we can do a home media moment for that, actually.
Okay.
I'd say 60-40, around that, give or take.
Okay.
I mean, just going off of, the Academy viewing it on an artistic level and appreciating that. But overall, it's really hard to say. I could really see it being anyone's game.
Well, yeah, and I mean, not seeing most of the nominees, it's hard. But obviously, this one has a lot of momentum going for it, coming off a win at the Globes and being high up on a lot of year-end lists. Up next, we've got the home media moment for this week, and that is The Lone Ranger. Now, this is a movie that came out in theaters before we had the chance to review it here, because it was before Film Fanatics existed. But we all did see it originally when it came out, and, revisited it this week for the home media moment, and Joe's going to tell us about The Lone Ranger.
This film is yet another attempt to bring the beloved Lone Ranger franchise to the big screen. The story follows the adventures of the gunslinging masked avenger John Reed, aka the Lone Ranger, played by Armie Hammer, as well as his sidekick Tonto, his Native American buddy, played by Johnny Depp. The movie follows the early meeting of the two and their bond, wrapped up in a plot concocted by greedy railroad tycoons. The two have a bumpy start to their adventure, but take down all kinds of baddies in this fun, if occasionally strange and awkwardly paced western. The cast also includes Helen Bonham Carter, as well as William Fichtner and Tom Wilkinson as the movie's villains. Apparently, many people didn't like this film. I myself went into it because the trailers had me intrigued, and despite the buzz, it didn't kill my interest. I think that the plot was actually pretty well conceived and layered, if not cliché at points. However, the movie had excellent costumes, sets, and cinematography to really capture the grand western feel. It seemed pretty gritty and cartoony all at once, though I'm not sure the aim was for small children. I think that Hammer's Ranger was a complicated and well-written character. He doesn't start off brave or even likable, but he grows into that role. Depp's Tonto has a rather interesting and surprisingly dark story, which caught me by surprise, though Depp's acting seems a bit conflicted at times. Since I found him entertaining to watch, though, I pass it. I also have to say that Fichtner is one of those actors who nobody really talks about, but who always gives great performances, such as in Contact and Drowning Mona. And he does do so here as well, as a disgusting villain. The movie does have flaws, and I can see why some people might not enjoy it. The Lone Ranger is marketed as a family film, but seems at times like a watered-down western for adults with some snippets of kid-friendly humor. However, I doubt children would enjoy this one. It isn't really an action-packed as one might expect from the large parts of the film, but it's a really fun homage to the West and does require the audience to pay some attention. It might not be what some want, but I found it to be well shot, well acted, and a good homage to a beloved series, and I surprisingly was satisfied. Lone Ranger gets a B. Nice.
I love that you talked about Drowning Mona, first of all.
Of course.
Yeah, Lone Ranger, by and large, became a 2013 punchline as a huge flop, but it actually did make $89 million in the U.S. and almost double that overseas. Now, it didn't make back its budget, but what's head-scratching about The Lone Ranger is that it was probably never going to, so I'm not quite sure why Disney dumped so much money into it in the first place. It would have had to make over $700 million worldwide to make back its budget. The odds of that happening are pretty slim. Mm-hmm. So, whether it was a flop in theaters or not, now that it's out on DVD, if you haven't seen it yet, you can judge for yourself whether or not it deserved all of its negative criticism. Now, for me, it kind of does deserve it. This is, by and large, not that good of a movie. It's so overlong and overboring, and it reminds me a lot of Depp, director Gore Verbinski, and producer Jerry Bruckheimer's other collaborations. The second and the third Pirates of the Caribbean films, especially. It's all over the place. It isn't particularly funny when they want it to be, It's confusing, and Depp does absolutely nothing to differentiate his Tonto from a lot of his other quirky family action characters, like Jack Sparrow, of course, or even the Mad Hatter. Now, the beginning of the movie started out strongly enough with the train sequence that we saw partially in the previews, and then about an hour and 50 minutes of horribleness, and then the last 20 minutes is the most exciting of all. Once we start to hear the unmistakable Lone Ranger theme song, the William Tell Overture, you get sucked in, and I was, into it. But unfortunately, you can't make a complete 2.5-hour movie from an exciting closing scene, and I give the Lone Ranger a D+. Justin?
As much as I think there's quite a bit to like about the Western genre, a big-budget epic just cannot exist in the current film market today. It doesn't help that the film bounces around aimlessly throughout the film in numerous directions, making the fact that the script went through in numerous rewrites painfully obvious, but it just drags, and Depp's tiring, awkward humor does not help the film at all. Some of these directions, such as corruption, and the original concept for the film having the villains be werewolves, which while I don't think would have worked, would have at least explained why the Lone Ranger uses silver bullets, may have actually made for a decent story. But instead, all the audience gets are various fragments of narrative ideas. However, as Dan mentioned, during the last 20 minutes or so of the film, the Lone Ranger actually starts to have some fun, and keeps the audience entertained. The only problem with this comes from the fact that taking close to 2 hours and 10 minutes of sheer and utter boredom to get there, it barely feels worth it. Overall, The Lone Ranger is, as I mentioned, an overlong Western that has several moments of promise, but just doesn't know what to do with it, and for that I give it a C-.
I will say something, Joe, that you mentioned. I didn't think Armie Hammer was that bad as the Lone Ranger. Like you said, I know Justin's not much of a fan of the actor.
I've never seen him in anything else.
Well, to be fair, this is my third viewing of his filmography. He's still relatively new to the business, and I mean, Social Network he did a relatively decent job with. Mirror Mirror happened. There's nothing really special to write home about that. To his credit, he was 20 times more tolerable than Lily Collins. It was an average performance. He didn't really bring anything special to the table. He was just sort of by the numbers.
I thought he made him likable, though.
Yeah, I mean, I don't agree. I mean, none of the movie's problems I thought were his fault. I thought he did a decent enough job in the role.
I know some people complained about him.
Yeah, oh, no, I know. And I know Justin was one of them. But I thought he was okay. I mean, I didn't find anything wrong with him, especially when next to Johnny Depp. I mean, I don't think that the two particularly had chemistry together.
That's probably debatable.
Oh, that's definitely debatable.
I think some things worked, some things didn't.
Yeah, I didn't find the chemistry to be there. But I think also that's partially because I'm tiring of Johnny Depp's whole shtick. And I could have done more with Armie Hammer and less with Johnny Depp in the film.
It's true.
Even though he was kind of the hook to get families in, I guess.
Well, I think that Tonto kind of kept people interested through most of it, but I think that the Ranger did come into his own towards the end of the film. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like, sort of with Django, where Christoph Waltz kind of was the hook for most of it, and then Jamie Foxx kind of takes over in the third act. Mm-hmm. I mean, Django's obviously better. We can all agree on that.
Right, but that's not a bad comparison. I understand.
It's kind of the similar vein. I mean, one guy kind of is the guy you appreciate, but at the end of the day, it's still the other guy's movie.
With The Lone Ranger, it just felt like Armie Hammer and Johnny Depp fighting over who should be the main star of this movie. Because it's narrated by Tonto, but it's really supposed to be Armie Hammer's story, and by the ending, it's like they can't really decide, and it's just frustrating.
To be fair, I understand that point, but they were kind of always a dual team. They kind of always played off each other pretty well. It's kind of like another comparison, Green Hornet and Kato. Like, obviously, one guy, you see the show, but everybody sees the show for somebody else. So that's kind of speaking to, I think, the character's lineage and his popularity over the years. But I do understand what you're saying. I think that the reason they had a hard time deciding is because the fans have a hard time deciding, possibly.
But I think what we found more than anything else, just from working at the movie theater, is the vast majority of people who did like this movie are of the older generation that either grew up with the TV or the radio show, or at least, saw it when they were young in reruns, like in the 60s and 70s. Mm-hmm. I'm glad that you yourself liked it.
I was fine with it.
But I think the majority of people that at least we saw that did enjoy it are a little bit older. I think as an introduction to this character, it was not as thrilling as they had hoped it would be.
I think the biggest reason why people probably didn't like it that much is because it was advertised as being a big action movie when it really wasn't.
Yeah, I that could be part of it.
I mean, and I was fine with that because I was kind of engaged in the world that they built up. I mean, I found it interesting. I thought that it was an excellent presentation at the very least. And I thought, like I said, it was a good homage to classic westerns. I thought so. But if you were expecting something to have a lot of thrills constantly, I mean, it was more of a character study, and I guess that's what I was interested in.
Well, like I said, now that it's on DVD, if you didn't get to see it while it was in theaters, make up your mind for yourself.
I would say if you're at all interested in westerns, it's at least worth a watch.
If nothing else, if you have HBO or Showtime or something, if it's on there, just tune in for the last 20 minutes. If that doesn't hook you, then you just won't be interested.
There's no hope at all.
Yeah.
Not at all.
That's actually a really good point. I agree with that, Dan.
Yeah, because that was exhilarating. I mean, if even half of the movie was like that, I would have gotten into it.
I will agree with you guys that the last action scene was definitely the best part of it.
And it is up for a couple Oscars. We should point that out in the technical categories. Yeah. So,
something I really liked about it.
Yeah,
the
there you go.
Makeup was good. Yeah.
All right. Well, speaking of Oscars, let's move into our top 5, which is going to be the 2013 Oscar Snubs. Now, before we do, I want to make a little note here. Last week on the show, we reviewed the new movie Her, the Spike Jonze film, and you guys both gave it A's. I gave it a B-, stating that I really took me about half the movie to really become invested in these characters, and that I would like to see it again, see if that changes my view at all. So I would like to leave Her with a B+. I sort of stand by the problems I had with it that I stated on last week's show, but becoming invested in the characters from the get-go really makes all the difference, because as you pointed out, Joe, if you don't see Samantha as a fully formed person and you only see her as sort of an idea or something like that, it does affect the bottom line of the film.
It really would.
Yeah. So going into it with the mindset that I had for the second half of the film on the first watch really did make a difference for me. So
that's good.
I wanted to make that note. So what we're going to do is give our top 5 people or movies that were snubbed, we feel, at the Oscars. And because we feel that they were snubbed, we are going to have to also give a person or film that we think not necessarily doesn't deserve to be there, but if you have to pick one to hightail it out of there, it would be that. Now, there were 10 possible slots for Best Picture. They only nominated 9, so that means that if you only have one Best Picture on your top 5, that you don't have to really get rid of one because there's already a free slot. So, Joe, why don't we start with you, and we'll do 5 through 2 for your Oscar snubs.
And I'm saying who I want and who I don't want.
Correct.
All right. Well, my number 5 is one we just talked about now, and that'd be supporting actress for Scarlett Johansson. Yes, I know that the Academy doesn't acknowledge that, but I thought that her voice alone stole the show for me. It really was a huge part of the movie. I thought it was excellent.
It was the Golden Globes, actually, that said they would not accept her. So she technically could have been nominated for an Oscar.
But she wasn't. So,
right.
Even so, I still think she should at least get a nomination for that. But who I would kick off, even though I said she did a good performance, I think Julia Roberts in August Osage wasn't quite as good as Scarlett Johansson and Her for me. Not to say she didn't do a great job, but if I had to kick somebody off from the selection, it would probably be her for supporting actress. My number 4 was for animated feature. I believe that they nominated The Croods, which I didn't really understand because I thought it was kind of a mediocre movie. So I'd say Monsters University should definitely get at least a nomination. That just seemed really odd to me that it wasn't there. Number 3 will probably surprise you guys. I thought David O. Russell's directing was fine for American Hustle, but it didn't really blow me away. I thought that movie was mostly carried by the acting. And the person I like to have at least nominated for directing was Ben Stiller, because I thought that his movie, Walter Mitty, while admittedly maybe not the typical thing that the Academy goes for, I thought that his directing was just beautiful for that film. It was incredibly fluid. It really caught me by surprise. I think he needs some acknowledgement for that. And Best Actor, well, I still think that Hugh Jackman did such a great job in Prisoners that I think he should at least be acknowledged for it. And I'd take off Bale from Hustle because everybody knows he's a great actor already.
Yeah, Christian Bale. Yeah, all 4 of the main actors in American Hustle were nominated. And yeah, Christian Bale, I can totally see that. Hugh Jackman did do a great job in Prisoners. And I love your choice of Ben Stiller for Walter Mitty. I mean, obviously, I think we know that was probably never going to happen.
I know, but I
agree that it was a great directing job. You and I both had that movie in our top 20 of the year.
I thought it was quite fantastic.
And yeah, it was really a great movie and a good directing job.
Not too bad of a list, I think, so far.
No, I enjoy your list very much so far, and of course, Monsters U can't complain about that.
Of all the things that I'm probably the strongest about, it was probably that one because I just didn't understand.
The Croods just wasn't that good. I mean, it was all right.
Maybe they were just trying to not have a Pixar one on there. I don't go.
I guess. I mean, I really can't justify it in the slightest.
Well, I'll go next here. I have my number 5 as Margo Martindale for Best Supporting Actress. She was in August, Osage County, which we just talked about. She plays Meryl Streep's sister. Now, she's a name and a face I've been watching sort of rise up for years. She is now starring in a freshman sitcom on CBS called The Millers, in which she plays Will Arnett's mother. Very, very funny on that show. And I first noticed her actually in a yogurt commercial years ago, and I thought, this lady's pretty funny. And then later that year, I saw her in the Dewey Cox movie, Walk Hard. And she appears in several movies a year, just in these bit parts. And I thought she really, really was a shining moment, in the cast of August, Osage County, which everybody was great, of course. But to hold your own with Meryl Streep, which I think she did in several scenes, I was impressed by that. My drop for supporting actress would be Sally Hawkins from Blue Jasmine.
I didn't see it.
Which you didn't see, so of course you couldn't kick her off. But, I don't know. It was all right. I don't think she deserves a supporting actress nod.
But you don't like Cate Blanchett that much, from what I understand.
It's not that I don't like Cate Blanchett.
It's just we love her too much.
Well, Justin loves her too much. It's his favorite actress of all time.
Well, rightly so.
I think that's a little much, but... we'll get to her. How about that?
Okay.
My number 4 is Tom Hanks for Best Supporting Actor. Now, obviously, he could have been nominated for Best Actor for Captain Phillips, but with the completely incredible performances this year, I think it's hard to kick anybody out of the Best Actor category. Christian Bale would probably be one, because obviously Robert Redford could have gotten a nomination. Michael B. Jordan for Fruitvale. But certainly Captain Phillips, I don't think, is quite up there with them. But his portrayal of Walt Disney in Saving Mr. Banks was great. And I would drop Jonah Hill from The Wolf of Wall Street. Good performance, but not quite of Tom Hanks' level, I don't think.
Teeth were too white.
Those teeth were insanely white. Number 3 is a movie that we're going to review on next week's show, and that is Inside Llewyn Davis. I feel that this should have been nominated for a Best Picture Oscar, and we'll talk about that on next week's show a little bit more. My number 2 is Emma Thompson, as well, for Saving Mr. Banks for Best Actress. And yes, Cate Blanchett would be the one that I would drop from this list. I don't think she gave at all a bad performance, and honestly, she probably has a pretty good shot at winning this year. But to stand with the Meryl Streep performance, Sandra Bullock's performance in Gravity, Amy Adams' performance in American Hustle, which was fantastic. I think of the nominees, Cate Blanchett probably, for me, had the weakest performance. And, like I said, she'll probably end up winning, so I'll eat those words, but that's who I would take off. Justin, let's hear your 5 through 2.
This should really be good.
Number 5, Robert Redford, Best Actor for All Is Lost.
Great choice.
As I mentioned in my top 20 for 2013, one has to admire a film that does so much with so little, and Redford embraces this to the fullest extent of the word. The majority of his entire dialogue in the film occurs during the opening moments, and the rest of the film, he lets his body language do the talking, and it speaks volumes. That said, The best acting category for this year was relatively fierce, so it's understandable that some really great and memorable performances were overlooked. As for who we should replace, my argument is Leonardo DiCaprio for The Wolf of Wall Street. Much like Dan, I think Leo is a great actor, but I don't consider this the best work he's ever done. That's not to say that he doesn't do a good job in the role, but best acting worthy is a bit of a stretch.
I'll be honest with you, Justin. I considered kicking him off as well, but I was thinking about it in terms of this. The man deserves a win, so if he won for this, that would be fine, because he needs to win.
You know what, Joe? That's exactly why I didn't put a Best Actor on my nominee. Because, listen, Robert Redford deserves to be nominated, but if Leo wins an Oscar, I don't care if it's for Wolf on Wall Street or reading the dictionary. I don't care.
Now, I know what you're probably thinking, Justin. I know that's probably not the way to do it, considering all the roles, but you know what? Let's keep him in there.
I don't want another Departed. Let's put
I would much rather kick Christian Bale out of the top 5.
You know, everybody knows he's great.
Yeah,
you know, it's fine.
He is great, but I still think he did a very good job.
He did.
Well, they all did.
They're all.
You know, it's. I think it's the hardest race of the year.
It is.
It's the Best Actor race.
Too many great ones.
Definitely. All right, my number 4, Jennifer Garner for Best Supporting Actress in Dallas Buyers Club. She plays a character so conflicted, and her interactions with Matthew McConaughey, that is, and Jared Leto are a great realistic blend of trying to be a human being while still trying to do her job. Her performance may very well go as one of the most underrated of this year. It may not have helped that her fellow actors did an exceptional job as well, but for those reasons, I leave it as my number 4. Who should she replace? Alongside Dan, I would say Sally Hawkins for Blue Jasmine. As much as I did like Blue Jasmine, I really did not think that Hawkins' performance in the film was really all that memorable. It was by no means an awful performance, in fact, leaps and bounds better than anyone's acting in Alan's prior film To Rome with Love, just a decent one.
I think Best Supporting Actress is probably the easiest to cut and paste from. I think it's really only up to either Jennifer Lawrence for a second win in a row, or Lupita Nyong'o for 12 Years a Slave. Maybe Julia Roberts, but I think it's really between those two.
I could live with either three of them, honestly.
I could as well.
My number 3, Dan, you'll be happy about this, and Joe, I'm sure as well.
Hopefully.
Monsters University for Best Animated Feature.
Yeah.
While I admit that Pixar has not made some of their best films as of late, Monsters University was a major step in the right direction. Not only did they make a film that, as you both have mentioned on the show many a time, that depicts a realistic, albeit kid-friendly look into college life, but they also told a great story with the traditional Pixar heart that most know and love. Who should be replaced? No question, the Croods. Now, admittedly, I haven't seen The Wind Rises or Ernest and Celestine yet, but the Croods was by no means deserving of being in the Best Animated Feature category. Admittedly, it did get a little bit better as it went along, but the first 20 minutes of the film were so obnoxious I almost gave up on it within that time. And my number 2, Emma Thompson, Best Actress, Saving Mr. Banks.
Oh, yeah.
If there was any film that was brutally snubbed for the Academy Awards in March, it would easily have to be Saving Mr. Banks. While all the competition for Best Actress gave wonderful performances, I cannot express accurately enough how ridiculous it is that Thompson did not get a nomination. She gave us a character that audiences loathed during the first quarter of the film and come to understand and respect so beautifully in the remainder of the film. Who should she replace? Dan, your jaw might drop.
Oh my god.
Cate Blanchett.
What?
This was an incredibly difficult decision. It took me probably like an hour and a half to live with this decision.
It took you a week.
Great plot twist. I like it.
Yeah. M. Night Shyamalan along this mess.
What a twist.
Yes, what? Oh, jeez. Okay. Like I said, this was a very difficult decision because as much as I do love Blanchett's versatility and her performance in Blue Jasmine for that matter, I don't think it was quite up to par with their competition, whom went so much further into their characters.
Justin, you just blew my mind because I never thought that get rid of Cate Blanchett from the Oscar ballot would ever enter your brain. But all of them, Cate Blanchett didn't do a bad job. None of them did. But if you're going to have to replace somebody for Emma Thompson, which I think we all can agree she deserves to be on there. Yeah, they were all so good, and Cate Blanchett was also good, but certainly her character didn't have near the arc that Emma Thompson's does.
Not in the slightest.
Not in the slightest. I would love Amy Adams to get an Oscar.
Mm-hmm.
That would be great.
You know, but...
Didn't she win for best... No, she didn't for The Fighter.
No. Her co-star in The Fighter did. Melissa Leo.
Yes.
And I believe she was also nominated for Junebug years ago.
Really?
But yeah, she's never won, and she was definitely nominated for Doubt as well. She's been up several times, and I think Amy Adams, though she's been nominated several times, people don't really realize that. People think of her as, you know, the romance girl or the woman from the Muppets, or I don't think people take her that seriously because she's so adorable, kind of like Leonardo DiCaprio in his first 10 years of serious acting.
That's true.
Well, I think that American Hustle would probably change that view.
I think it's if she's going to win for anything, you know, at least thus far, this is going to give her the best chance, I think. Although, again, I mean, Sandra Bullock's going to give her some competition. Cate Blanchett will as well. I don't know. We'll see. I am glad both of you put Monsters U on your list. I didn't have the room for it, but we all know how much I love that movie, so I'm glad to see that made your guys' top 5. Joe, what is your number one biggest offense this year at the Oscars?
Well, I know that the acting was really great in American Hustle, but if I had to kick something off for Best Picture, honestly, I really don't see it.
Okay.
So I do have 2 other spots, though. One would be Saving Mr. Banks.
Nice.
I think that really should get some kind of nomination. It seems like something the Academy would really like, and I thought it was very well done. Emma Thompson did a great job. And the other one was one we watched recently, August Osage County. I think if that won, honestly, I'd be really satisfied with that as well. It's a great contender. Fantastic movie.
Nice. Yeah, I agree. My number one is also August Osage County. Now, I've already put Inside Llewyn Davis on my ballot for Best Picture nominee. So, unfortunately, I would kick out The Wolf of Wall Street. I think it was put into the category because it's a Martin Scorsese movie, and people in the voting block see it and they say, oh, Martin Scorsese movie. Let's nominate that for Best Picture and Best Director. I don't think he deserves to be up for Best Director either for this film, but of the other nominees, I think August Osage County would fit in very, very well.
I could live with Wolf being kicked off.
All right.
I'd agree.
Fair enough. Justin, what's your number one?
All right.
Big stuff.
My number one, Inside Llewyn Davis for Best Picture.
Wow.
I don't want to tip my hat too early about this one yet, as we are reviewing it for next week, but how this was snubbed out of a Best Picture nominee will forever be a mystery to me. The Coen brothers have taken their audiences down quirky roads before, but this takes the concept in a different, intriguing direction. Aside from great music, audiences get strong performances all around, particularly from Oscar Isaac, who would probably count as my honorable mention for Best Actor snub, along with an original and compelling narrative. For these reasons, and many more that I will go further into next week, I leave this as my number one snub for Oscars 2013. Now, I know that we can have 9 nominees for Best Picture, but I would still love to answer the question, who do I think should be replaced if that were the case? And my argument would happily be Captain Phillips. Although I am glad that newcomer Barkhad Abdi got a well-deserved nomination for Best Supporting Actor as the antagonist Muse, I felt that this was a film betrayed by director Paul Greengrass's tiring directing style. It's fine to make a thriller that's realistic. It's not when it's poorly paced and runs on entirely too long, with the lead only giving a great performance in the final few minutes of the film. Captain Phillips is still a great story and a good movie, but not deserving in the slightest of being considered the best picture of 2013.
I love that even though you didn't have to, you still took a couple minutes to slam Captain Phillips. You didn't need to even kick anybody off the list, but you still had to get one in there, Captain Phillips.
That's one that's always really bothered you.
It's just not that great a movie. I don't understand why everyone's celebrating it like it is.
I think it's because of the film's subject matter and how the characters were presented, and I think that also those breakout performances, particularly by the new actor, those are probably some standouts.
Which are deserved, and I mean, I have no problem with him being up for an Academy Award. I welcome it, honestly. I hope it serves as great motivation for newcomers to up the ante in acting.
Listen, in another year, though, Tom Hanks would have easily gotten a Best Actor nomination for this role. This was an actor's year, and there were a lot of good male lead performances. But in a different year, I think Tom Hanks would have easily gotten a nomination for Captain Phillips.
I'll be honest, Justin.
If it was a slower year...
I think people were surprised that he didn't.
There were, and I've read many of them, but I'm sorry. Having a good 3-minute long, powerful performance does not make a Best Actor nominee in the slightest.
And I don't agree that it was only at the end of the film that the performance shined.
I think he was very believable and down to earth, like the film was supposed to be. And I'll be honest, Justin, I don't think it's going to win of all the...
Oh, it's clearly not going to win.
I mean, of all the others that are selected, it's not the best, but I think that it's a decent pick for at least a nomination. I think when I was taking this into account, you got to look at what the Academy likes. The Academy likes these kind of stories. That they love their true stories. They like the down to earth stuff. They do.
That's why, to be honest, I really was surprised by all the Saving Mr. Banks snubbings, because it seemed like a story that would be right up the Academy's alley.
That's one that surprises me too.
My own personal bias aside, I was shocked that it didn't get
older
anything.
Film buffs.
Yeah.
I don't know either, honestly.
Well, we're going to talk a lot more about that in about a month, the week before our Oscar show, when we revisit our top 20, and frequent listener of the show, Tim, who we've talked about, he's brought DVDs for Old Classic Night on occasion, and he's going to be joining us for that to give us his picks for the best and worst of the year, and we're going to talk Oscar with him. So plenty more chatter about that in about a month. But right now, let's get to this week's triple feature. Now, that is our new classic, which is a film from the last 2 years, and our old classic chosen by this week Joe as part of Guilty Pleasure Month. And we have our Oscar nominee A to Z, and this week that is The Alamo. First up is The Impossible, our new classic. This is based on the real-life experience of Maria Balan and her family during the huge tsunami of 2004 in the Indian Ocean. It stars Naomi Watts as Maria, whose last name is changed to Bennett for the film, Ewan McGregor as her husband Henry, and Tom Holland as their 12-year-old son Lucas. They're on vacation in Thailand when early on in the film a huge tsunami comes and basically destroys the entire village, in the process separating the family. Henry and their other 2 sons have stayed together, and Maria and son Lucas, who were swept away from the others, find each other and together try and get help at a local hospital, while the rest of the film, Henry and the boys, try to find Maria and Lucas. J.A. Bayona's breathtaking direction, Oscar Fowler's cinematography, and fantastic performances, specifically from Watts in an Oscar and Golden Globe nominated role, and Holland, really bring the tragedy to life. The role reversal of Lucas having to take care of his mother, who got extremely injured, and him having to keep his head and make very adult decisions just intensified the drama. Though it never went to wide release here in the U.S. and only made $19 million, it was a huge worldwide hit, earning close to $200 million, and if you're not familiar with it, I would definitely recommend The Impossible, and it gets an A from me. Joe?
Yeah, I think it's quite shocking that not a lot of people saw this one. I think...
Yeah, I wish they had released it to a wider audience. I didn't see it in theaters
I think it would have
came out.
Been successful. I mean, it's one of those things that would really hit home for a lot of people. It's had such a fantastic presentation.
And especially visually, to see it on the big screen would have been awesome.
And heck, even 3D, perhaps.
Perhaps. Well, that would be a little too intense, maybe.
Some of those gruesome flesh hanging off legs in 3D might be a little stirring for people. But really, I have to echo pretty much everything you said. It's kind of really easy to follow you, Dan, because
thanks.
Pretty much agree with everything you said on that one. I think Naomi Watts, I mean, she's a great actress, kind of a side favorite of mine. She's did a great job with this. I don't see her in too much.
She's an underrated actress, too. You don't hear her a lot in the conversation.
Well, she's one of David Lynch's favorites. So
so you love her.
Obviously one of my favorites.
She's in your conversations.
Well, Mulholland Drive, and this one, really equally great performances. Ewan McGregor, also great job. No surprise there. And I also thought some of the younger actors kind of stole the show even from them. And they told this really grounded, human story. And they did it equally, I think, through the performances, but also complemented with the cinematography and the direction. As you said, the visuals were breathtakingly beautiful, and they hit home when they needed to. They just hit all the right moments. It really struck a chord with me. It just told a really simple story, and I think, as I said before, the young actors really do hold up the film. And I think those characters, even though they're there isn't really that much specifically said about them. They managed to really kind of come off the screen and seem incredibly real. And that's something that I thought was one of the strongest elements of the film. And you're really invested in them, even though you know so little about them. The only real negative I had about it was that I kind of wished it was a little bit longer. I thought it was a little short, and that kind of goes in hand with the other little issue I had with it. I felt that the characters were good for what the film required, but you could have had a little more time in the beginning, I think, to flesh them out.
To get to know them.
Because I felt like, okay, we're in this event, and we're seeing everything they're going through because of the performances, but the characters themselves, there isn't really that much there in terms of writing. I thought that they were kind of bland. I think that's one thing. I wish we had a little more time to flesh them out, and that would have probably given it a slightly higher grade for me, but it doesn't change the fact that it was still a very well done film, and I give The Impossible an A-.
Nice. Do you know why I think that they did it that way? Is because the tsunami affected hundreds of thousands of people, and I think by not getting to actually know the characters, I think it just sort of hits home that this could be literally anybody's family.
And I think that's an excellent point.
You know?
And I definitely see that. And it's good that it works. It does work. But personally, I liked these characters as they were presented.
I did too.
And I would have liked to have known a little bit more. Just a little bit more about them. They could have fleshed them out a teeny bit more. Even a few minutes, I think, would have been enough.
Justin, what'd you think of The Impossible?
Somewhat similar to Pariah, The Impossible was a great film that just did not get enough attention, and it's a shame. Watching this family's story of survival and dealing with the disturbing aftermath of a disaster from various angles, from Naomi Watts' vulnerability to Ewan McGregor's journey to protect his sons, is engaging, though the decision to devote an hour to each separate story seems a bit safe. Alongside this comes gorgeous cinematography that draws audiences in even further to the horrific nature of a tsunami. The ending may border somewhat on the cheesy side, but it's hard not to say that the reunion isn't at least to some extent touching. The Impossible is a film that deserves so much more than it's received despite a few minor flaws, and I give it an A-.
I teetered on A- for this one. It's definitely on the lower scale of the A, but I stand by my A. I think it's a really, really good movie, and I do hope people get to see it.
Basically, if you like American Tail, you'll get to see a live-action version of it in this movie.
Slightly more PG-13 than American Tail, but yes.
One way to look at it, yeah.
I would agree.
I think this was only sort of a footnote when we talked about August Osage County, but Ewan McGregor is a great actor. Here we are, 2 movies that he's in that we're reviewing on this week's show, and he's really good in both of them.
Well, yeah, Ewan McGregor's great.
Yeah.
I think people know that. They just don't talk about that.
They don't. And, with the enormously talented cast of August Osage County, I think some of that fell by the wayside. I said that he was in it, but none of us really said that, he was great. But he was.
Well, it's one of those
things. And he's good in The Impossible as well.
No, I like him a lot. Everything I've ever seen him in, I've liked him. Even if he's been in crappier movies, I think he does an excellent job.
He's very versatile, too.
He
plays a lot of different types of characters.
Plan himself into pretty much any role and do something interesting with
I agree.
I would agree with that, definitely.
It's like he knows what movies he's in, and he just says, I'll roll with it this way. And it's
that's a perfect way to put it, actually.
There you go. And I think that's definitely a skill an actor can go with. You know what movie you're in, and you know how to play it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I really recommend The Impossible, and I hope people check it out.
Yeah, I never heard of it. I'm glad you guys introduced it to me.
Yeah. I like when we do that. Like Pariah.
It happens. Pariah was actually really good, too.
Yeah. All right, well, Joe, let's talk about your movie for Guilty Pleasure Month, and that is XXX.
Yes. A 2002 action movie and a hip James Bond ripoff of sorts follows Xander Cage, played by Vin Diesel, a thrill-seeking sports enthusiast and stuntman who, after a few run-ins with the law, is recruited by NSA agent Gibbons, played by Samuel L. Jackson, to infiltrate a group of Russian terrorists hiding in Prague. This movie was a favorite of mine in my early teen years, and I think it kind of sums up the pulse of the times very well. The movie has a fairly bland plot and is littered with some pretty bad dialogue. The acting for the most of the cast is less than impressive, for the most part. However, despite the mediocre and sometimes just plain stupid narrative, the film's greatest strength is probably Vin Diesel, who actually gives a pretty good performance and, like the film itself, has some fun and really doesn't take itself too seriously. Throw in some good one-liners here and there and some self-aware humor, as well as some rather impressive stunt work, and a catchy techno/heavy metal soundtrack, and a cameo from Danny Trejo, and you have yourself a fun action movie that, if not taken too seriously, can actually be pretty enjoyable to watch. One of my favorite movies as a 13-year-old, and it still is. I will admit that the film does falter a bit in the second act when it actually does try to have a plot, but other than that, it still holds up for me. My normal grade for this movie would probably be like around the C range, but I'm very happy to still give it a B.
Nice. For our guilty pleasure.
For my guilty pleasure,
yeah.
Yes.
Justin, what'd you think of XXX? You had seen this before or no?
Yeah, twice actually.
Oh, wow.
That's a good sign.
Yeah.
It's important to know one thing about XXX before reviewing it, and that is the fact that it is completely and utterly insane. It cares about having a fun time with as much loud and obnoxious chaos to happen as humanly possible, and as much as it may pain me to admit it, XXX mostly succeeds in said mission. While the dialogue is absolutely atrocious and the plot near incoherent at times, watching what peril Diesel's character will throw himself into next never gets stale. XXX is not the best escapist action film out there, but for giving audiences a more adrenaline-infused take on James Bond-style spy thrillers, it's hard to find something to really compare it to, and I leave XXX with a C+.
I thought this movie was a perfect candidate for Guilty Pleasure Month. Like a lot of action movies, it's not really that well crafted, acted, or written, but it is, like Justin and you both mentioned, it is a lot of fun. Vin Diesel was in fine form as Xander Cage, and I would say it's probably his best role that I've seen him in.
I would probably stick with that.
Yeah, I mean, I thought he did a really good job, and of course you can't go wrong with Samuel L. Jackson in this type of role.
Never can.
What is on Netflix streaming, which is how we watched it, is apparently the director's cut.
That's right.
And thankfully Joe pointed out which parts weren't on the original release, because they really needed to go. Mm-hmm. So I give my grade without those few confusing or just completely extraneous scenes. And that grade is a B.
Oh, yeah.
I'm glad you brought it, Joe. I thought it was a fun thrill ride, as they say.
Yeah. Yeah.
I thought it was a lot of fun. And the dialogue is pretty corny, but he does have a lot of real good one-liners.
And I think you pointed that out to me. I didn't even notice it. There were some funny lines in there.
Yeah.
Like it was kind of acknowledging how silly it was. Mm-hmm. But I'm glad you guys liked it.
Yeah, it was definitely tongue-in-cheek. It definitely knew it was being corny and cheesy. The soundtrack, as you mentioned, is great. I knew the soundtrack 10 years before I saw the movie here. But a lot of good, like, driving. Pulse-pounding, heavy metal, beats-driven, electronic stuff. It all came together, I thought, pretty well. All right, we have our Oscar nominee A to Z to close the show. And this one was nominated for Best Picture, Best Supporting Actor for a man named Chill Wills, and it also was up for 4 technical awards, including a win for Best Sound Recording. We're talking about the 1960 picture The Alamo. Justin?
So The Alamo. General Santa Anna, played by Ruben Padilla, has been swooping his Mexican army across Texas. In order to stop him, Colonel William Travis, played by Lawrence Harvey, and Colonel Davy Crockett, played by John Wayne, also the director of the film, are ordered to uphold their small force on the Alamo mission to buy time for the main reinforcements. Director John Wayne loves his country. That's made abundantly, if not painfully, clear throughout the duration of this overlong epic, and it's also the biggest problem. He loves his country so much that he reduces any minority character into some of the most racist and offensive stereotypes ever committed to film.
A little bit.
Without question. That's not to say that there aren't some interesting moments, such as the subplot involving how the small team actually makes attempts to prepare for their enemies, but these moments are few and very far between. Wayne does show a moderate amount of directing talent with a couple of interesting shots, and a good, albeit way too late in the game, finale battle sequence. But overall, The Alamo is an epic littered with useless subplots, but sprinkled with a few moments of promise, and for those moments, I offer it a C.
Well, it's definitely higher than I was willing to go on it. My first John Wayne film, which is The Alamo, is a dud. It's overly long, has a completely pointless romance. Wayne's directing was awkward, and I truly cannot believe that the original cut of this movie was 3 hours and 20 minutes. The 2 hour 47 cut we watched was painful enough and, like Justin mentioned, extremely offensive. It's kind of like how I feel about The Lone Ranger. Honestly, the first 2 hours or so are really boring and a struggle to get through, and then the last few scenes, once the action finally starts, I can get behind, but it takes so long to get to that I've already mostly checked out. The cinematography is decent, and some of the speeches, though long-winded, are mostly well-written, but I just can't recommend this one except if you're like a classic war movie or a Western buff, and I give the Alamo a D+. Joe, how did it grab you?
Well, as you guys both stated, it was very long-winded and somewhat slow at points. I agree with you completely, Dan. I think one of the biggest problems I had with the movie was the thing that they took so much time focusing towards, which didn't develop towards anything, which was the very forced cliche romance. I think it was a complete waste of time.
And yeah, it didn't go anywhere.
It didn't. She literally just leaves, says, you know what, I'm not really into you, bye. It was really terribly handled. It really annoyed me because...
almost verbatim what happened.
Because it really is, and that's what annoyed me, is that, okay, you're going to spend time with this, let's at least make it go somewhere, and they just don't. And that's what made it seemed like an insult to me. I thought some of the acting was good from some of the cast members, but I thought that some of them were actually kind of subpar, honestly, particularly from Wayne himself, who I thought didn't really have a lot of energy in his role.
There was no gusto.
I don't know. I've seen some performances from him I've liked, but this was definitely one of the weaker ones. Really, the best parts of the plot for me that really stood out were actually the war elements. Whenever they wanted to focus on the plot preparing for the invasion, trying to defend the Alamo, that actually interested me, and seeing what they were doing to take basically steps towards that. And I did think that the costumes and the sets, and especially that last battle sequence, was really awesome. Like, it really got good in the last half hour or so, but I really did not like it much at that point, building up to that. So it's really only for the action sequences and a few decent lines and performances that I would award the Alamo a D+ as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's a shame because, I mean, if you're a classic war fan, and you like these older school kind of war movies, it would be good were it only like the hour and 10 minutes throughout the entire movie that they either are preparing for the battle or in the battle.
Well, I mean, to be fair, the story of the Alamo, yes, it is basically built to be a war movie. I mean, you have to get into a bit of the culture and the characters and try to make a little more of a story. But the main thing people want to see in the Alamo is, I think, primarily that action, or at least something related to the action that's going to come. And in this particular version, I feel like only about maybe 15 to 20% of the movie is actually focusing on that. Mm-hmm. And most of everything else is just fluff. There are some decent character moments, but most of them don't really stand out because we don't have enough time focused on them. And to be perfectly honest, some of the random shots of the people and different characters were quite offensive, as you guys suggested. Mm-hmm. Whether it was Mexican or African American, it just was a bit distracting to me. But but time and place considered, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's taking place, of course, in the 1800s.
So it's a little excusable.
Take some liberties, I guess.
Think John Wayne was a little bit more aware than that, but even so, I think that the movie stumbled a bit. But there are good things worth checking out. But honestly, I'd say just watch the battle sequences, and that's pretty much it.
Other than that, you're pretty much heading into a 2 hour and 20-minute slog.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, can you imagine that the original cut of that movie was more than 3 hours?
I felt like a lot of what we saw was unnecessary.
It really was. You called it. I mentioned that the romance was pointless, but you really hit it home. That, right, she just kind of up and leaves with an hour to go in the movie still. They spent all this time building up this romance that then she's just like, all right, peace. And then we never hear from her again.
They literally drop it.
He doesn't try to get her back. It was like they just drop it. It's why even have that in the movie?
That's like about 45 minutes wasted right there.
Right. All right. Well, hate to end on a bummer, but we did have some positive reviews here in the program. And speaking of reviews, we have started posting our 5-word reviews on our Facebook group, which is Film Fanatics with an exclamation point. And anybody can join that group, or you don't even have to join. You could just go on the page and look at our 5-word reviews. And we've also started posting them to our Twitter feed as well, which is at Film Fanatics Pod. And that's where we'll also update you on whenever we put a new podcast up. And, of course, If you subscribe to us on the YouTube channel, then you'll always get notifications that we have a new episode. Joe, anything on your YouTube channel, the Merlin Boss?
I'm getting together my Q&A subs at the moment. Other than that, I'm actually going to start another collab group with some other anime reviewers of mine. It's kind of something that'll probably come out by the time this podcast is released, so I'm not spoiling anything. We're going to be doing a whole other format with different kinds of reviews of various series and other discussions, so look forward to that as well.
Very cool. That'll be one to check out. And then that will be on the same page, though? Or will it be a different...
There's going to be a whole other channel involved. I think we're going to close down our previous one and move to a different format for a lot of different reasons. But it should be something good. We've got a lot of energy going into this one, so it should be fun.
Awesome. Okay. Well, next week you can fill us in on the details of that then.
Definitely.
All right. Well, thank you for listening, and we'll see you back here next week on Film Fanatics. Bye.